Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the No Name Musicast. My name's Tim, and this is
Joy.
And before we get going, thank you again to all our listeners. We really appreciate to everyone listening to our little podcast that we make every week. We see, our numbers of downloads rising, and sort of certain parts of the world we never thought we would ever get involved with. We look on the statistics, and thank you for listening.
Yep, we still haven't hit our Antarctica, though, yet. We're still working on that.
Joey, wasn't it your father who knows somebody on a research station or something?
That's what I was told, but I haven't seen anything yet, Dad. I'm not convinced.
Well, I tell you what, we keep our fingers crossed, because it would be nice to check the boxes of all the continents, but there you go.
It's really just our only goal at this point.
So anyhow, before we get into the topic this week, which is my turn to pick the topic, we normally do a tip of the day. And Joy, do you have a fabulous tip for us this week?
My tip is going to be very specific when you hear the topic in a few minutes, but I have been a procrastinator a lot, but then I've also been one of those people who does things too quickly, right? Like I want to do it right now, or I want to be like, do it last minute. I've never been someone who probably does the logical thing and does it somewhere in the middle. So I may have been given some homework for this episode, and I was very eager to listen to whatever this homework was the day I got it. Then a certain someone may have got what we called an old-fashioned cold, because he doesn't even get the new age diseases.
See, it was a retro disease, Joy. It wasn't one of these newfangled COVID things. This was a normal cold, a regular cold, like people used to get, you know.
So I had to go back and re-listen to all of said songs again today. So I guess my tip is to always be prepared for the unexpected when you're given homework, and you may have to redo it.
There we are. That's a good tip. And in the spirit of always being prepared, my tip, which is something I heard on NPR this week, but I'm going to pass it off as my tip because there you are. So this is a great idea, and I've never thought of this before. Now, these days, a lot of people have Apple Pay, and is it called Android Pay? What
Google Pay.
Google Pay and Samsung Pay and Nokia Pay and Sony Ericsson Pay, or whatever it is on all these phones. A lot of people have all that stuff set up. But some people don't, or it might not work, or something like that. But this is like an ultimate be prepared thing. So what you need to do is get yourself a £10 note, a US $20 bill, a 20 euro bill, a 20 Australian dollar bill, a insert name of other currency here, it doesn't matter. Get yourself something like that, and then your phone, just flip the case off the back, and put it in the back and forget about it. And the reason you want to do that is because there's going to be a point when you're going to forget your wallet, you're going to forget your purse, you're going to need some cash, or you're going to need some cash for something. Maybe your Apple Pay, Donk Pay, Google Pay thing, they won't accept that.
A lot of places don't actually use it.
Yeah, so you're parking somewhere, maybe at an event, and you need cash, and you don't have cash. However, guess what you have in the back of your phone that you've forgotten about? Your emergency $10, $20, euro, pound, whatever bill, and there it is.
I mean, that makes sense. It's a good idea, because I'm a very out of sight, out of mind person anyway. So if I put it away, I'm never going to think about it again.
Yeah, so you just put it in the back of your phone. Don't even give it a second thought. And then at some point, you're going to have a cash-based emergency, and you've got a little built-in emergency fund just in the back of your phone.
Makes sense. Smart. One time I learned the hard way about, what the wallets you can attach to the back of your phone? Like all the cases. So I had one for a little while, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is fine. And it was fine in theory. I was a little worried if I lose my phone, there goes everything I own with it. But I don't have a lot of money anyway. So if anybody ever found my credit card, they'd be disappointed. $10 in a gun wrapper. So anyway, I was walking one time. Don't ask me how I did this, but I dropped my phone in the trash. And when I dropped my phone in the trash, all the contents of the wallet went in the trash. Well, I fished the phone back out, didn't pay attention to it was just like my ID. And yeah, I think it was just my ID. I don't even know that my debit card fell out, but the ID for my driver's license fell out. So the next day I'm going, oh no, where's my driver's license? And I finally gave up. And, on the Virginia DMV website's $20, order you new one, have it sent to your house. So I go do that. Then I'm walking past the trash can, and I'm out of the trash can, and I remember that my phone fell in the trash can. And I look over, and there's the license after I spent the $20.
It's
There you go.
me.
So I guess my tip is be careful when you drop your phone in trash cans.
And maybe not get one of those wallets that has the card money thing in the back.
Yeah, not a good idea. It didn't work out the way I was hoping. I just remember though, I like saw the trash can and I was thinking, I already know. As soon as I saw it, I was like, and I don't remember how I dropped my phone in the trash can. I think I was like sitting at the desk or something. It fell off, but still, it's kind of funny.
Oh dear. Anyhow, so before we get into the topic, I'm just going to do a quick CD of the week. Now, as many of you have seen, I have been posting up the CD of the week thing to YouTube. So if you wonder what we look like, you can find No Name Musicast on YouTube and see us sitting here in our respective basements and spare rooms doing the podcast.
Don't judge my light situation right now. I tried to adjust the one blinding light. Just look away. Just hold my hand here the entire time. Anyway, I live in a basement. The lighting's not ideal.
And the other thing is the CD of the weeks tend to post up more or less straight away, whereas the episodes are 3 or 4 weeks behind. So it's like a little sneak peek into the No Name Musicast future for you. If you subscribe to us on YouTube. Anyhow, this week's CD of the week is a brand new album. Look at this. It's not even from the 70s or anything.
It does look very fresh.
Okay. This is from 2021. Who'd have thought it? 2021. Whoa. And this is Mammoth WVH. Now, have you heard of Mammoth WVH before?
No, but it has a cool cover.
Yeah. So Mammoth WVH is the project by Wolfgang Van Halen. And Wolfgang Van Halen is Eddie Van Halen's son. And, you know, we lost Eddie Van Halen a year or so ago, and the last few tours of Van Halen, Wolfgang was playing bass, but Wolfgang's actually a multi-instrumentalist and songwriter. And not only did he write and sing on all these songs, he plays all the instruments. He plays guitar, bass, drums, keys, the whole thing. He's the complete package. So the musical genius genetics were passed from Eddie down to Wolfgang. Now, this is actually a really good hard rock album. I didn't know what to expect, so I heard a few things before it came out. And I don't know, it's really good. Wolf really does rock.
Yeah, I mean, he comes by it honestly, I guess. I mean, it's in his blood.
And it's not like Van Halen style classic rock. Mm-hmm. It's probably more like Mark Tremonti or it's even like Nickelback-y, I suppose. I mean, some people go, no, WVH is nothing like Nickelback, but in that kind of style.
Makes sense.
But
it's a very distinct sound.
Yeah, but I would recommend checking this album out. I'm lucky I got a pre-release copy, and I got one of the ones that was signed by Wolf. So that's kind of cool.
There we go. And if Tim ever needs to make some money on the side, he knows what he could sell.
Yeah. Yeah, I paid another $5 for it, and it'll be worth probably not even that much. But that's beside the point.
Well, darn.
But there's some good tracks on here. Mr. Ed is a great track. Distance is this, like the single, if you will, that came out, which was like a sort of a tribute to him and his dad. And the video is actually really heartbreaking if you watch it. But anyhow, I recommend this week this album by Mammoth WVH.
Is it a crab?
Yeah, it's like a big crab, like
with a car.
With cars.
He's got a car. He's got a car in his claw, a very red car. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But there you go. Anyhow, check that album out. That's my tip for this week on the CD stakes.
Okay.
Okay, so on with this week's topic. So I set Joy some homework, as which he alluded to earlier, and we've spoken over the course of this podcast, and we've been running this podcast for over a year now, about acts that are big in the UK, that are institutions in the UK, but are not really that well known in the USA. So what I thought I would do is I would set Joy some homework. I would pick out 3 of these acts that have come up on the podcast, give her some choice picks to listen to, and then we would discuss and we will see where this goes. So I'm probably introducing 2 of these acts to Joy, probably for the first time, and one of these acts Joy's probably familiar with, but not as familiar as the UK audience would be. So
one of them I knew because of their famous concert intro, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
On top of the other one, but yeah.
So I'm entitling this episode Unknown in the USA. That's what I'm going to call it.
Creative.
And what I've decided to do is go with these three acts. We have Tom Jones, which Joy would have heard of and probably knows a few of the songs of. Chaz and Dave, the Rockney trio, duo, famous for their songs, very famous in the UK that she's probably never heard of before. And Status Quo, which you may know a track or two of, but they're probably not to the same amount that your average UK listener would be.
Exactly.
So I'm going to go through each of these acts. Joy's been given some songs to listen to, and I just want to get her take on where we go from this. So okay. I'm going to start somewhere at the beginning with Tom Jones. So what did you? I mean, you've probably heard it before, but what's your thoughts on "It's Not Unusual"?
That's like his most famous hit, maybe here, besides, well, actually the first three that you give me were probably his biggest hits besides What's New Pussycat. So I always think of it, It's Not Unusual, which I love that song, by the way. It's my favorite Tom Jones song. It's been used in like every TV show, every movie since the beginning of time. But I think it does a really good job at showcasing. We talked about his voice is very story. Like it's loud, it's boisterous, but it is intense in its manner, like the rhythm at which he speaks. But I think that song for his voice is my favorite.
Yeah, I think I started with It's Not Unusual because it's probably the definitive article when it comes to Tom Jones songs.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, I once played it in a cover show band at the Lakeside in Frimley in the UK. Mm-hmm. And the guy who wrote that song was in the audience. And I think I probably have already told that story. But that was kind of cool when you come off stage and the guy who runs the stage manager says, oh, did you I forget what the guy's name is. He said, did you realize blah, blah, blah was in the audience? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, he's the guy who wrote It's Not Unusual. You just played it to him. I was like, oh, wow.
Like, glad I didn't know that before.
Exactly. But yeah, that is your definitive article in the world of Tom. And like you say, it does kind of showcase his power. There used to be like an urban myth sort of thing about the guitar break in that it was played by Jimmy Page. And I believe it's not Jimmy Page. It's some session guy of the time who did it. Because as you know, Jimmy Page, prior to Led Zeppelin, was a session guitar player who played on all kinds of stuff before he started playing with Zeppelin.
I actually watched it. It was like an interview. I don't know if it was like a full documentary, something with him talking about that. And he has some really cool stories of different artists he's worked with. So I always think it'd be cool to do that kind of session work. Exactly.
I mean, I've played on people's recordings, and I've done things where you roll up in the studio and someone plays you a track and you noodle a few solos over it and they say, oh, thank you very much, $100. Cheers, thank you. And I've done that. And then you never know whatever becomes of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. You are basically a member of ABBA, so I'm sure that there's people knocking on your door, Tim.
Yeah, I'm surprised with this ABBA Voyage thing that's going on in London. I'm surprised I haven't been called in, with my ABBA heritage.
I know. I thought you were on speed dial. All right. So the next one, I guess, is Delilah, right?
Well, what I was going to do is I was going to go to the next artist and just try and.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I ruined the surprise, everybody. Let's get to the next artist.
You didn't hear that, Delilah. What's that? Okay, so the next one I'm going to come to is Chaz and Dave. Now, as we said, Chaz and Dave are a British institution. It's the mashup between Cockney and rock, and it's called Rockney. And I believe that was actually their record label called Rockney.
They kind of had a little bit of that kind of rockabilly and like, I don't know. I've heard other artists that like that, but I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a cross between the two.
Exactly. So I'm going to open to see what you think. And I'm going to ask you about Ain't No Pleasing You. And I'm going to tell you why. Ain't No Pleasing You was the only #1 hit they ever had in the UK. I mean, they had other hits, but that one was a huge hit when it came out.
Well, this is funny because I've got my little notes here where I'm just writing everything that comes to mind when I'm hearing the song. And I said, I like the intro where it kind of sounded like a violin. And then he zooms in and the guy was literally like slapping the bass, which I thought ironic because they're slapping the bass. But I did say of all the ones that I listened to from them, that was my favorite. And I said, I think this one may have been in a movie I've heard or something like that before. It was the most familiar of the music that I was listening to from Chaz and Dave. And so maybe because that was their number one, and maybe I've heard it on a TV show or something. That specific song sounded very familiar to me.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, as I said, it was certainly a big number one. At some point in the early 80s, I believe it was number one. And it's highly likely it could have been used in a film, a British film that you would have seen. Now, one interesting thing about Chas and Dave is, you know, I can't remember the name of the song, the Eminem song. One goes, oh, my name is, what's that Eminem song called?
Well, my name is Slim Shady.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. So Chas and Dave, much like Jimmy Page, did session work before, you know, they were in and around that scene before they were Chas and Dave. And they played on a Labby Sifri song, playing piano and bass. And that Eminem song samples a piece of music that they both played on. So it's funny that Chas and Dave is on an Eminem song.
I mean, it does have rhythm, and they seem to like rhythm. And the next thing I wrote, though, Tim, I was going to say was, I even said, this one just feels very Billy Joel-like to me. And then I wrote, even down to the piano tie. Because, like, in the one, like, I think it's a Keeping the Faith, maybe. I think Billy Joel's wearing a piano tie. Mm-hmm. I could be wrong, but I said, then I wrote, why does piano always sound really good with a messed up marriage and a spiteful relationship? Which ain't no pleasing you. It makes sense, right?
Exactly. But no, this is, as I said, this was their biggest hit. And the other thing you find with Chas and Dave, if you listen to Jerry Lee Lewis, not necessarily this track, but other Chas and Dave tracks, you can tell they're heavily influenced by Jerry Lee Lewis. Yeah.
Which the piano makes it too, but and that kind of makes sense with the sound. I like their rhythm though. They have a very interesting way of the way they do, like in each song that I listen to, not to spoil anything, they had just a really nice rhythm that it really caught me off guard. I don't know. It's something about it was a little different. I don't know exactly what the structure was. I'd have to look at it and like music, like actually in the thing, but it gave them a kind of cool sound.
Sure, and when they played live, I mean, Ain't No Pleasing You has the orchestra on it, which is probably the only one that they did like that. But when they played live, it would just be Dave Peacock on bass, Chas Hodges on piano, and Mickey Burt on drums. And it was just the three of them, and they would create that sound. And another interesting fun fact about Chas and Dave, another rock and roll creation, rock and roll, that's a Spinal Tap song. Rock and roll connection. You know what I mean, Joy?
Yes, words are hard. Hards are words.
It's terrible. I just spent 3 days in bed getting over a cold. What do you expect?
And he's 97, so it really took him some time. Okay. Anyway, Rock and Roll Connection.
Yeah, the rock and roll connection is that Mick Burt, the drummer from Chas and Dave, his son, Tony Burt, was the original drummer in Frequency, and Frequency being the band which it was in with Ian Husbands, and of course the albums from him with the Big Fish, which is out there now on Spotify, etc. So he didn't play on that, but he was the original drummer when we were setting that band up.
Dang, I'm surprised, Tim. You don't have them knocking down your door right now. As soon as you said Frequency, I was like, oh, I see where this is going. All goes full circle.
There we are. See, everything comes around in a big old circle. There we go. Anyhow, so let's move to the next one. So Status Quo.
Okay.
A British institution, a band which I've gone to Wembley Arena multiple times with my dear mum to see because she likes them so much, who is virtually unheard of in the United States, even to the point where Francis Rossi, the singer from Status Quo, singer, guitar player, songwriter from Status Quo, his wife is from the United States, and he said he actually enjoys coming here because no one knows who he is. And like he'll go to dinner with people, and they say, "What do you do, Francis?" He says, "Oh, I play a bit of guitar now in a band." "Oh, that's nice," and that's it.
I mean, best of both worlds, right? If he wants to be a rock star at home, he'd be a rock star at home. But if he wants to come here and just go out and do his thing, you know.
Yeah,
seems like the best of both worlds.
For some reason, their boogie rock never really broke the US market, but they're big Europe and they're big in the UK and other places. Well,
what's weird about that is that like their sound sounds very what I listen to similar to other artists that were popular during that time. So It's kind of interesting they didn't specifically break through.
Yeah, I don't know whether that particular style didn't translate to the US market. I don't know.
Oh, I mean, I thought they sounded very similar to other what I think when I was looking at them, it said their first song was in 1968. Something like that. So, I mean, what were they popular 60s, 70s, or did they get into the 80s or no?
Well, what happened in the late 60s, they were making psychedelic music, but they used to do boogie rock in sound checks for fun. And then after a while, they realized the boogie rock thing was actually more fun than the psychedelic music they were playing. They have a song called Pictures of Matchstick Men, famously, which is kind of like a psychedelic phasing, flanging sound, and it's like way out there type stuff. And there's a few other songs around the era that were similar, but I said they then got into the boogie rock. But I mean, they are still going now. Rick Parfitt, the original rhythm guitarist, sadly died a number of years ago, and they decided to carry on without him, which is a bit weird because it was always the two of them. And, you know, they've sort of become one of these nostalgia acts like Queen and Adam Lambert, where the core guy is gone, but they continue to go out and play the music, etc., etc.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense because I kept seeing like R.I.P. Rick, like because I was listening to the songs on YouTube, and I kept saying somebody said someone from the band had passed. So
yeah, it was Rick Parfitt. He was the engine room of the band. He was the rhythm guitarist in the band. I think he wrote a lot of the songs as well, and in fact sang a lot of the songs. And I don't know, it was. For me, when Rick was gone, it ceased to be Quo because it's Rick Parfitt and Francis Rossi. That is status quo. And John Rhino Edwards on the bass, and they had various drummers, and I forget the name of the keyboard player. I can't remember his name. Anyway, the keyboard player, I think, has been pretty constant through it. But without the two guys, for me, it doesn't seem to be status quo anymore.
And if you've got two people who are your key members, you're going to play off of each other and build some type of chemistry as an artist. So it's hard when that's wiped away.
Exactly. Anyhow, so I'm going to start with probably their most famous song. Now, they opened Live Aid with this song. And an interesting fact, I always assumed up to, 20 years ago or so, that this song was their song because in the UK, it's so synonymously theirs. But I found out that it's a cover of a John Fogerty song, and that's rocking all over the world.
And that's what I was going to say. Me and Tim kind of talked about it. I think this once before. I've heard the John Fogerty version before I heard the Status Quo version. So it's just funny that you thought the other way around because John Fogerty is more popular in America. The only reason I knew about the song is because, like you said, it's the opening for the concert. But yeah, I mean... And I was going to say I like it. And then I was like, oh, that's going to sound like a pun because the song says I like it over and over. And over. Anyway, but yeah, I had heard that version first.
Yeah, it's funny. As I said, I found out about that way after the fact. And I was like, really? As a cover? I didn't know that. It's so definitively status quo in my mind. It's hard for me to think of it as anything else.
Well, and I could see how that song. Have you ever played that song, Tim, like in bands or anything?
Oh, yeah, Guilty.
Yeah.
We used to play it in Guilty Party, which was a function cover band type thing, and that maybe the band was on the army base and the alcohol from a previous episode. Maybe, possibly, though I wouldn't like to confirm or deny that.
We hear nothing, we know nothing. But I was gonna say I could totally see that song playing at. Like there's this genre of music that works really well with cover bands in like kind of early boomers, maybe like 40s, 50s year olds at like Tim's VFW or something. I could see this song working very well for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it always used to go down well. I mean, you play that in a pub, you play it in like a nightclub, and you'd play it in a function, and you'd play it in a this, that, the other, and always went down well. It's because it people know that song, and much like if you play Johnny Be Good in a cover band, just the beat and the familiarity makes it just hit the mark every time.
Well, and I watched the live version that we were talking about earlier when I was listening back this afternoon, and it's a great song to open a concert like that with. But then I was thinking it would have been really cool if Freddie Mercury could have done a version of it. I think that would have sounded really cool, Tim. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, the Queen in their early days used to do rock and roll covers like Jailhouse Rock and stuff like that in their set before they had the wide range of music that they have now.
For some reason, when I was watching it, I was just like, I bet a Queen version of this would have been really cool. It just, for some reason, stuck out to me that I think they would have done a nice version.
Yeah, and I think Status Quo and Queen were all in and around the same era. And in fact, the famous 1986 Wembley concerts, Status Quo was the opening act.
Yeah. I mean, Oh, good.
I was going to say, and my friend Mark Chudley, who is a fabulous guitar player, who I may have mentioned on this podcast before, he is a super fan of Status Quo. Like, you know, we was on a Zoom chat one time, and he was talking about how many records he has, and he said, "Yeah, I've got about 370 records." And we're like, "Oh, okay." And he's like, "Yeah, that's just the Status Quo 7 inches."
Good Lord. So. And then they're still traveling the world and still doing all these concerts and stuff, basically. How old are they now?
I mean, Francis Rossi, I mean, he, much like a lot of these guys, he's probably in his 70s at this point.
Well, looking at the little pictures and videos I saw of him, he looks pretty good for his age. So
yeah, I mean,
he really is rocking all over the world.
Yeah, they're still out there getting it done. But as I said, for me, it's not really Status Quo anymore without Rick Parfitt involved.
That's fair.
But there we go.
I mean, maybe they just really enjoyed playing music and didn't want to give that part up.
There we are. Fair enough. Anyhow, all right. So let's go back to Tom. So I picked out some choice cuts of Tom for Joy to listen to. Now, this is a quirky song that I like of Tom's, and this is the Young New Mexican Puppeteer.
So I may have heard this before, but I can't tell you for sure. But my first note says, do people enlist? Because he's like talking about, you know, this young Mexican kid hoping that people will listen to the stories from a puppet. Like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And my first note says, do people in Europe listen to puppets that often?
Well,
like, do people in Europe just walk around telling you stories by puppet?
It was a different time, Joy. So just a couple of things you should know. One, it was a different time. And two, this is taken from a film called The Young New Mexican Puppeteer.
Oh,
but maybe back then that was the primary method of communication. You didn't have cable news. You didn't have your Facebooks or your MySpaces or your Yahoo chat groups or whatever. Maybe the puppet rolled into town. It's like, breaking news.
It's like one of the old snake oil salesmen used to come in and just roll in. But then I like the point of the song and how he's explaining all the different stories. I said, but the concept was odd. Why would people just listen to the puppets? That's what my notes say.
Well, you know, in the UK, for example, you have that rich tradition of the Punch and Judy show. Are you familiar with Punch and Judy?
No.
Yeah.
Did you say Punching Judy?
No, Punch and Judy.
Okay.
So anyway. What you would have at the seaside, you would have a booth, like a very tall booth. Okay. And it's a puppet show. And there's Mr. Punch, and I think it's his wife, Judy. And there's normally a dog, and there's sausages involved. And there's some kind of vague story that goes on with these puppets, and in the end they just start whacking each other.
That's fair. It's very oh, go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
And it's classic seaside stuff. The Punch and Judy show.
So in No Name Music Cast original news, by news when I mean from like 93 to 94, when me and my twin sister were little, we made our own Puppeteer. So we got a big cardboard box, like a giant one that like a big TV came in. You know, I'm only 3 feet tall at this point, so that was large. And I cut out like a piece to put the puppets in, and then I sewed a little like red thing to look like the curtain behind the puppets. And me and my twin sister used to put on puppet shows for family members. Don't know what any of the shows were about. I don't even know if they made any sense, but I thought I was super cool.
Now, I just as the Punch and Judy world is going through my brain, did your puppet show have a crocodile involved as well?
There was a horse, and that's just because I had a toy horse that I could run across the thing. I don't know of any crocodiles. Like my little toy horse just appeared, and I made all the puppets.
See, I think with Punch and Judy, I think there was normally a crocodile involved.
Is it because you were seaside? They're trying to warn you what happens when you get too close to a crocodile.
I've never really thought much about the logistics of the Punch and Judy show, other than it turns into a big fight brawl type thing at the end.
All right, Tim, you're going to have to write a note. Go on YouTube, find a Punch and Judy, and put it on the page when we're done. So everybody can see what the heck we're talking about. Because I know there's just as many people as me going, What?
There will be a large proportion of our audience who know exactly what I'm talking about. And there'll be another proportion of our audience like, what is he going on about?
There we go. We'll introduce the American Society to Punch and Judy. Yeah, my only experience with puppets are when I tried to do my own puppet show. And then when I went to church a lot as a kid. And when they would do children's time, they had puppets. And if I remember right, the puppets did sometimes like get mad at each other and attack each other. So maybe somebody in my church knew something about Punch and Judy. I'm not sure.
There we are. See, Joy, I'm bringing these cultural artifacts to you via the gift of music. Who would have thought I'd be telling you about Punch and Judy show?
I just can't get over my notes. The first note on here says puppet song. Do people listen to puppets in here? Question mark. I don't know. We don't have puppets rolling down the streets to tell us the songs. All right, Tim. Well, what's the next song?
Okay, so let's move on to Chaz and Dave. So we had the big #1 hit, Ain't No Pleasing You. But probably culturally, my favorite track from Chaz and Dave would be Rabbit. Now, this was probably a first-time listen for you. So what did you quite make of Rabbit?
So there's not a lot of lyrics to the song, in case anybody was wondering. But I was like, okay, Rabbit, that's the choice. And then I went, wait a second. Was this an attack on me and never shutting up, Tim? I see how it is, Tim. That's what my notes said.
No, I should say, I don't know whether you probably figured this out, but in UK English, if you rabbit, you speak a lot. You could say, oh, that guy over there is just rabbiting on about who knows what. So if you're saying rabbit, that's what you're saying.
I think that kind of translates to American English because a rabbit's like hopping all over the place. That's what I kind of thought. So like it was someone who's talking too much.
Let me tell you, Joy, it was not a personal attack. It's just a favorite song of mine of Chaz and Dave.
I mean, it says, I wonder how many times they say rabbit in one song.
A lot.
But for people who don't understand, so like you're talking about this girl who he likes and finds, physically attractive, but she won't shut up. And she's just like, rabbit, rabbit, rabbit. He used to say rabbit all over the place, emphasizing that she's talking all over the place.
And then the famous line, you've got more rabbit than Sainsbury's. Now, I don't know whether the supermarket chain Sainsbury's actually still sell rabbit, but maybe at one point they did. I don't know.
I mean, is rabbit a food that people eat a lot in England?
I mean, people do eat it. I mean, people catch rabbits and eat rabbits. Okay.
I mean, people do that here too, to be fair, but I just wasn't sure if it's like a popular food. Anyway, yes.
It's an old-fashioned niche food. It's like people used to eat rabbit and people used to eat pigeon as well. Pigeon was seen as a delicacy. Well, not so much a delicacy, but certainly in post-war hard times, people would catch pigeons and make pigeon pie. Yeah. Well, and then on the flip side, I can imagine playing that song live and not being able to get lost in the lyrics. Like, I don't think I could perform the rabbit song, Tim, without getting lost on what rabbit I was on. Well, there's a few live versions. I think it was at the Shepherd's Bush Empire. I think there's a great live version of them doing this, and it's fantastic. And I think they must have performed it so many times that they rabbit, 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 bunny, bunny, jabber, rabbit, and it's just like completely pure instinct to them. I know. I kept thinking, I was like, well, and then if you were performing it and you did forget your line, just say rabbit. Nobody'd know. No one would know. And I will say, from a technical perspective, the bass line played by Dave Peacock on this track is absolutely fantastic. If you listen to it back and take the comedy lyrics out of the equation and just focus on his bass line, it's up there with, something that Rush would play or something. It is so good. Well, I made that analogy on one of my notes while I listened to their songs. I said, yeah, they're very comedic, but they're very musically talented. And that's usually, to be a good comedy or parody artist, I really think you have to have the music down first for it to work, No, yeah. And then the other thing that's interesting about Dave Peacock, the bass player, Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy, said that his bass hero was the guy in Chaz and Dave. Whoa.
Were their names really Chaz and Dave?
Yeah, Chaz Hodges and Dave Peacock, or
Charles
Hodges, if you will.
You've said that like 4 times.
So what was your... So the first time you heard Rabbit, what was your takeaway? What did you... When you heard it, you was like,
I was like... I was a little bit... I wasn't expecting it to be... But then I thought it was super... Okay, here's what I thought was super interesting. The first thing... Because it was so rhythmically the rabbit, it put a really good visual in my head of like an actual rabbit like jumping around. Mm-hmm. Like they did that very well, which, if someone's talking, they could seem like a rabbit because they're jumping around and talking too much. And so I was like, that's pretty funny. Honestly, they did a great job of making that visual work when you're just hearing an audio.
Yeah.
That was my takeaway.
Okay.
It's my hot take, Tim.
Yeah, and she's got more rabbit than Sainsbury's.
I mean, it's a fun song. I would totally listen to it again.
There we are. See, well, I'm glad I could bring that to you. All right, so let's move to the quo. So I think we covered this one previously, but I wanted you to have a good listen to it. And again, we found out recently that this was a note-for-note cover, but in the army now.
Mm-hmm. And I will say... that was the last one I listened to before we came in to re-record Tim while I was eating dinner. Mm-hmm. And is there any other lyrics to the song after the opening? Or does it just say in the army now? Over and over and over. Because me and Charlie were laughing back and forth. And Charlie goes, well, if they say it one more time, I guess I'm in the army now.
Well, I mean, you got a vacation in a foreign land. Uncle Sam does the best he can. He's in the army now. I
know, but towards the end, it felt like they were just saying that one line over and over. It was just funny because Charlie's like, well, if they say it one more time, I guess I'm in the army now. But I've heard the original, which I can't remember who the original is, and it was used in the Army Now film, which is from like the early 90s. Mm-hmm. But I don't remember who sings the original. I'd have to look it up. But I watched the version. Have you seen the version? They redid it for like 2010, like they're older and they did it with current troops. Have you seen that yet on YouTube, Tim?
No, I've seen the original, the people who did it originally. I've seen their promo video from the 80s or 90s or whenever it was. And I've seen Quo live play it 100 times, but I'm not familiar with that one.
That was kind of cool because it was like they went out and you could tell they found like actual troops and were like talking to him and hanging out, and like they put him in the video, and that opening part where he's kind of like, you're gonna have to, what was it? You're in the army now. Get prepared to go over to like a different country, or however he says it. Like all the troops just start laughing. So they're probably like, we know, we just signed up for free college. Thanks for reminding me.
And I think this actually ended up being some kind of unofficial anthem for the UK Army.
I mean, it makes sense. And I'm pretty sure that they were UK Army men, like, or women. There were some women. It was like a new version they did in like 2010. I just clicked it because I hadn't seen it, and it was kind of cool.
Okay.
I mean, it's straight to the point, though. It's just reminding you of all the things that you get when you enter the army and what the expectations are, what's probably going to happen. I wonder, though, Uncle Sam... It says Uncle Sam does the best he can. So the original artist was probably American, right?
No, they were German or something. German or Dutch or something.
Is Uncle Sam a universal term?
No, that's just a reference to the United States.
Okay. I was just curious because then when I was thinking, I'm like, well, who... Because it's kind of, that's for people who don't know about Uncle Sam, which I feel like it's probably pretty known because it's probably been in movies and stuff. And back in the old World War I, World War II days, there was an Uncle Sam poster that said, "We want you." And he's like pointing for like people to sign up. And then it became synonymous with like the draft in World War II and things like that. So that's why I was just curious what the original band was from.
Yeah, I think it's just a proliferation of US media and US influences that a European act would write a lyric like that just because it's you see it in films, you see it in TV, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, as I said, it's probably pretty universal at this point.
Exactly.
I wonder why he was called Uncle Sam.
I don't know.
I'll have to give it a Goog at some point. I've never really thought about it. He doesn't really look like a Sam. He just looks like an angry old man who wants to join the military. What a hot take, Joy.
There we go. All right. Well, let's go back to our friend Tom, Mr. Jones. So,
Okay.
let me think what one of these songs here. So, the Green Green Grass of Home. Now, this is a cover. It's a country music cover. What did you think of that one?
So I felt, once again, like this might have been one that I've heard at some point, but it does not. I've heard a lot about this one, actually, Tim. A lot. First of all, I said, who is it Humperdinck? Wait, no, that's a different song, isn't it? Was it Humperdinck that he was in this song? Was it?
Well, there's an Engelbert Humperdinck, but I mean, Engelbert Humperdinck probably did Green Green Grass at Home, but I don't think it's his song originally.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. I was like, who's Engelbert Humperdinck? For some reason, I wrote that name. Very British name is what I wrote underneath it. Anyway, so I said it's one of those really cool storytelling songs, which I always find very interesting. And it reminds me, like, very popular in like the Elvis days for us, which you compared Tom Jones to the American Elvis before. Mm-hmm. And I said, for some reason, this, and for those who don't know, it's about a prisoner. I caught on to that towards the end, the prisoner. But it reminded me of like a church hymn. And the reason I was thinking that it is very reminiscent of the Southern country music telling songs. Mm-hmm. So when I was younger, my grandmother, I went to a Methodist church in the South. And my grandmother, I grew up listening to a lot of that kind of country sounding, spiritual, soulful music. Mm-hmm. And it just really made me think of that. For some reason, it really reminded me of those, and it kept giving me really nostalgic feels about the stuff that my grandmother listened to a lot, like with the Grand Ole Opry and things. Because at one point, there's a lot of spiritual music and country, and it kind of transcends. So that's what it reminded me of. But it's just one of those very classic. In the South in that time, it was the storytelling stories were really popular, and it's very identical to that. And that's what I kept thinking of. And then it was just cool that it happened to be about a prisoner.
Yeah, and I think it came from like some kind of country music record that Tom had at the time. And then, in fact, the lyrics he sings are slightly off from what was actually written, because that's how he heard it when he wrote the lyrics down, but when they performed it. And it's funny that it was a country gospel, exactly as you described, type song. But now, certainly in the UK, when you see Green Grass at Home, it's seen as this kind of song about Wales, which is where Tom Jones is from.
Well, that is a very green area.
Sure.
But what's interesting about that? So Wales, Ireland, Scotland, all those countries during Pangea were connected to Virginia. Mm-hmm. So our landscapes, like, how we have a lot of the mountainous areas in the green, it's that's why they're so similar. And a lot of times they'll film stuff in Virginia that they're supposed to be like in Scotland or something on the TV, like in movies. Like, it's very popular for them to do that in Appalachian Mountains. So that could be why it's also, it transcends. You know what I mean? That kind of, the way he say, it's very interesting you say that now, because that's cool. I had no clue that it was a Southern song, but I'm glad I picked up on that. That's what it reminded me of. I just kept thinking it was just kind of what my grandmother, when we bring my grandma home from church, my mom would put on like the Grand Ole Opry or something like that for her. And every once in a while, my grandmother was very senile towards the end. That sounds really bad, but she was. Mm-hmm. But every once in a while, songs would like pique her up and you see her start clapping her hand, and it was always to the rhythm of whatever that song was. And so this reminded me of that.
Yeah. Well, there we are. I'm glad it, tweaked that memory for you.
I know it's random, but I don't know why I wrote Engelbert Humperdinck down. What did he have to do with that song?
I think he probably performed it. It was that era of those kind of crooners that would cover those songs. And I'm sure that was a song that a lot of artists were performing at the time. So maybe when you was giving it a goog, Engelbert Humperdinck's version came up.
I bet he was in the comments on YouTube. Somebody was saying it. All I wrote is, who's Engelbert Humperdinck? Very British name. I don't know what my note was about that, everybody.
we will do an Engelbert Humperdinck deep dive maybe in 10 episodes time or something. I don't know.
Was he did he do it? So he did a lot of the storytelling type songs?
I think so. It's a name I'm familiar with. I know a few of his songs, but he's not someone I'm super know a lot about.
Well, for some reason, I wrote his name down. But anyway, moving along.
There we are. All right. So let's steer this back to Chaz and Dave. So we've had Ain't No Pleasing You. We've had that amazing song, Rabbit, a rock and roll masterpiece that is Rabbit. So I'm going to see what you think of Margate. Now, Margate, I will tell you, Margate is a coastal town, which is like Essex, which I think it's southeast London, southeast coast. And it's a place where a lot of people from like London would go for their holidays because it was not far to get to.
Well, it's just funny because my literal note says Margate. Is this a people go to? Question mark. A beach? A boat town? Is that a thing? Explain.
Well, it's what you call a seaside resort. So in the UK, there's a number of seaside resorts. Margate is one. Brighton is another. Blackpool up in the north is another. And they were places where before international travel was easy and cheap enough to do, people would go to seaside resorts. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they'd have a pier there. They'd have entertainment. They'd have, you know, slot machines. Well, probably not. Well, maybe like thick coin-operated gaming type things. And it's where you would go. You would go to sunbathe. You'd go and paddle in the sea. You'd go to see attractions and stuff like that. And that's what people did. And in fact, around the UK, they used to have holiday camps as well. Are you familiar with holiday camps?
Like, I think I know what you're talking about, but I don't think we call them holiday camps.
So there's somewhere you would go to where it's like a holiday park, and you have all your entertainment, and you have chalets that you would stay in and stuff like that.
So in Dirty Dancing, like the Smith Mountain Lake was kind of like if you watch Dirty Dancing itself, Tim, they have that kind of thing going on where they're staying and you got all the entertainment and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And these holiday camps were closed off. So you could either go in as a day visitor if you wanted to, or you would stay there for a week or 2 weeks or whatever like that. So a lot of these coastal towns also had holiday camps in them. So it was a place that you would go. And Margate is somewhere that I said a lot of people in London would go to Margate. And this is a tender song of Chaz and Dave reminiscing about all the great times when they went to Margate.
Yeah, there's a lot going on that I was like, okay, so it's about this guy who worked really hard so he could go to Margate, and then he's taking a bus. Well, they called it a coach, whatever, down. And then it's like, don't forget your buckets and spades and cossies. And I don't, buckets and spades and cossies. What are those, Tim?
Okay, so bucket and spades, that's what your kids would have. Okay. You have a bucket. Some sort of vaguely in the shape of a castle. The one I had was blue, and it was sort of like had castle turrets on the bottom.
Okay,
and
I know what you're talking about.
A little plastic spade, and you fill it out with sand, and then you tip it upside down, and then you take it off, and look at that, you've made a castle.
So we just call that a bucket and a shovel here. Got it?
and then your cozy, that's your swimming costume.
So many things.
So you'd be on the beach, your whole family would be there, the kids would be making sandcastles with their buckets and spades, and you'd have your swimming costumes on, your cozies, and then you'd go into the sea to paddle, and it would be freezing cold like you wouldn't believe it, but you'd have the best time you'd ever had.
So then it says, we have a peel of gelled eels.
Jellied eels.
Is it actual eels?
Yeah.
What's a cockle stand? Stall. C-O-C-K. That, whatever you're about to say.
Yeah, cockles and mussels. It's like seafood. So you would go to like a stand and you would get jellied eels, which is eel in some kind of gelatin type thing, and then cockles and mussels, which are like sea stuff.
Huh. So then it says you can keep the Costa Brava. What's Costa Brava?
Well, the Costa Brava is a place in Spain. So certainly, you know, as the 60s and the 70s rolled on, people started discovering that you could go to Spain cheap and easy, and you was guaranteed sunshine, because that's something you would never get in the UK is guaranteed sunshine. Because, as you know, in the summer, you might get 2 weeks of hot weather, but that's probably about it. Whereas, you know, you go to Spain throughout the entire summer, and you know it's going to be baking hot. So he's saying you can keep your Costa Brava and all that palaver. I'd rather have a day trip to Margate with all my family.
It was a cute song. I was just confused. I was like, I'm going to write this down and ask him what he's saying. I assumed that as soon as you said that about the bucket, I'm like, I think they mean like a sand bucket. It was a spade. So are all shovels called spades in Europe?
Certainly in the UK, yeah. I mean, I think it's interchangeable at this point.
Because it's shaped like a spade?
Yeah, but you'd say a spade. But certainly it's in the context of what you'd have on a beach, it's a bucket and spade.
I think we had a freak jam where they were debating this. one Zoom chat about what a spade was.
Is that the same one where they tried to convince you in the UK Doritos were Doritos?
Well, I knew that was fake, but not that far. But no, I think there was one, wasn't it like something about with Saz's mom and everybody was like, what's a chevron? What's a spade?
I think so. I think I was there.
I think this was already an ongoing debate. I don't know that we ever got the answer. There will never be. Yeah, I mean, it's a cute song. And I mean, it's got a cute little thing where it's like, you know, he wants to go with his family and everything. But it has that nice rockabilly sound like some of their other stuff. I was just like, I don't know what Margate is, but we have those kind of seaside resorts in America too. We just don't, I don't think they're as popular as they were probably in Europe at that time.
No, I mean, like around here, you have Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. You have Virginia Beach. Yeah. Outer Banks as well to some degree. And it's the same concept, sort of. But certainly here, like Myrtle Beach continues to be a place that people would go on vacation.
Yeah.
But places like Margate, places like Brighton, well, maybe not Brighton, but certainly Blackpool.
Day trip type stuff.
Yeah, they're seen as fading resorts. They're you know, certainly pre-COVID's, people typically are not going to those places for their holidays anymore.
Well, and like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, you know, since lockdowns and when international travelers become a little bit more difficult, I think some of them are having a little bit of a renaissance to some degree. But I think, you know, when the dust settles to some, you know, later on down the line, I can't see people going to Blackpool rather than going to, I don't know, Portugal or something. I
was going to say, in Europe, it's so easy for you guys just to like, you know, go to Greece or something. And like you said, you're always going to get sun. You're going to get nice, pretty beaches. Makes sense. And it is so close because I've driven to Germany in half a day. I've gone to Paris on a day trip. You know, it's so easy because it's just there. Yeah. Well, I mean, the few times I was there, that was one of the things I was noticed. I mean, to be honest, I kind of think of the European countries a lot like states just because of how close they are, like in the United States, because like, for us, you know, we drive an hour and a half. We're still in the same country, but we could be in a different state by then. Sure. And also the perception of distance is different. Like I went to a friend's concert a few weeks ago and it took about an hour and 10 minutes to get there. Well, maybe about an hour. It's Rocky Mount, Virginia. It's about an hour from here. And the guy I was talking to is his gig. And I said, this is a local show for us. And he said, how long did it take you to get here? I said, about just over an hour. He says, wow, you drove that far? And I was like, yeah. I said, it's the perception of distance. I said, this is nothing. I said, people commute longer than this every day to work. Yeah, and it was funny because on TikTok, there was this, he's from the UK, and he said it threw him for a loop when someone showed they took the country of England and put it inside the state of Texas. To show how much bigger the state of Texas is than the country of England. And he's like, it's crazy. I just learned that you could be driving all day from like 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. at night, and you would still be in Texas. Yeah. That's a good point, though. But to be fair, Tim says that we say this, but in Europe, when he was in Europe, he was always just stuck in traffic. So it all ended up being about the same time. Yeah, I used to live 3 miles from where I worked, and it took me 40 minutes to drive there. Jeez. And, you know, if I had my time again, I would have walked to work every day and walked back. If I had my time again, because it would have taken me actually less time to walk it. And in fact, there was a few times towards the end of my tenure after I'd sold my car, before I moved here, when I couldn't be bothered waiting for a bus, I actually did walk it because it was quicker. I would have probably done the same. As long as it wasn't, you know, negative 1,000 and pouring down rain, which given you guys, that would be normal. Yeah, the not negative 1,000, but certainly the pouring down with rain bit is very common. Well, just get a really good umbrella. So, that's all I can suggest. There we are. All right, so let's go to Status Quo. We'll do Status Quo, and then we'll do one more of each, and then we're done. Okay. So Status Quo. I'm going to go with their ballad. This was their big ballad song that they had that didn't follow the formula of the kind of boogie rock that they were known for. And this is Living on an Island. Okay. So when I was looking up this song, or while I was reading, I was like, I didn't really Google them, but you know how like in the comments underneath it, you could read stuff in the little about me details on the video.
Mm-hmm.
It said this was one of their first songs. But I'm thinking it was. Maybe it was the other one.
Well, Pictures of Matchstick Men, which we briefly covered earlier on, which is one that I did ask you to listen to. That was from 1968. Now, Living on an Island...
That might be what I'm thinking.
Yeah, Living on an Island is from 1979.
Okay, then I got them backwards. Never mind. Ignore that. But this one was interesting because I was like, well, he got right to it. I wasn't expecting him to say, wait for my friend to come and we'll get high. I was like, okay, well, he got straight to the point. Unless there's some metaphor I missed it.
No, I think it's very clear what Rick Parfitt's going on about there. And it's not getting up on a ladder, ladies and gentlemen.
You never know. He talks about blue skies. Maybe he wanted to reach them, Tim.
There we are.
But I mean, there's a lot of like talk about passing time. He's missing some girl. He's got a friend he's going to go see, and they're going to go to an island, which I'm pretty sure is a metaphor. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming getting high makes them feel like they're on an island on their own, though I could be wrong. That's what I got from the song.
There we are. I also have a Rick Parfitt from Status Quo claim to fame.
Yeah.
So I used to live in Twickenham, which is not far from Hounslow for you bingo card players out there. And I was walking from where I used to live to the bus stop to go to work. And as I was waiting for the green man thing to cross the road, a blue Aston Martin with like a white interior came round. And guess who it was? It was Rick Parfitt from Status Quo.
He was looking for you, Tim. He needed you to come play in the band. Didn't quite recognize you without your guitar in front of you.
There we are. But I mean, I was probably 16 or 17 or something, so I don't know.
Maybe unlikely. How did you know it was him, though? Did you see him, or like?
No, I saw him. It was very obvious it was him, and plus it was a super fancy Aston Martin in blue with white leather interior. I mean, that's a rock star car. It's either a James Bond car or a rock star car. It can go either way.
I always associate it with a James Bond car, but it could very well be a rock star car too.
Well, for me, a James Bond car is a Lotus Esprit.
I knew you were going to say that. Funny. But yeah, on this song, though, where it's like, we're going to touch the sky at the end, and he just keeps repeating sky over and over and over again. It was pretty cool. I mean, did you say they were into psychedelic kind of music at some point? Yeah,
as I said, at the very beginning of their career, the tail end of the 60s, it was psychedelic music.
This might have been a little bit of an ode to that, but kind of also a ballad at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I could be wrong, but when he's saying that they're going to touch the sky, I feel like there were drugs involved. Maybe they're touching skies.
One doesn't want to speculate, on this family podcast, but Joy, I think you may be correct.
It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll.
There we are, there we are.
But yeah, no, this one was kind of cool. It was different than the rest of the ones that you gave me from them. And a lot of people in the comment section were saying this is a favorite because it took on a different sound.
Mm-hmm. Certainly in their sort of mid to later career, it's different from the boogie sound that they got with some of their other songs, like, Rockin' All Over the World and what have you.
Makes sense. All right, Tim, what are we going to do from Tom Jones?
Okay, so Tom Jones, we'll close out the Tom Jones section with this is a favorite of mine, and it's a cover, but it's Kiss, which, as we all know, was a Prince song.
I had a lot of feelings about this one.
and I should say it's a duet of sorts with a electronic music duo or whoever they are called the Art of Noise.
Yeah, I could hear someone. I said, okay. I struggle with this one because I love the Prince version so much, and I just didn't see Tom Jones having the swag to pull it off. I'm sorry. I know. I was like, I actually kind of feel dirty listening to this one. Absolutely not. I'm sorry. I think I'm too stuck on the Prince thing. Though I will say, every time I hear this song, I always think of the line, act your age, not your shoe size, because that's what my dad would tell me as a kid all the time. But then I also wrote, the video makes it worse. His singing's better than his dancing. Sorry, Tom Jones. I just couldn't. It's probably just because I have such a bias for the Prince version, honestly.
Yeah. And I think in the UK, I mean, certainly the Prince version is known. Absolutely. But to some degree, this was such a big hit. I think this cover of Kiss by Tom Jones is almost like the definitive version. You know what I mean?
Oh, that one hurts, man, y'all.
And certainly when I played this in a cover band, we more channeled the Tom Jones version than we channeled the Prince version.
I could see that, especially the type of cover band you've been in. That makes sense. I don't know. That one just was, I was like, it's like, it doesn't sound bad, but it doesn't, there was just something off that I didn't like.
Well, I suppose because maybe your ear is tuned so much to the Prince version. That hearing the Tom Jones version is like, yeah.
Well, and it's once again kind of like you guys probably heard the other version a lot more than I did. So it's probably more of a familiar and nostalgic thing. But yeah, sorry, Tom Jones. I like the other stuff, though. I don't know. And then it was the video was very 80s. Very 80s. If you've never, like, he's like dancing in the video with that black and white thing behind him. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I just need to see it live. Maybe that would sell me.
Well, I've seen Tom perform it twice live. Once in Bournemouth and once in the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. And needless to say, it was fabulous on both occasions.
I'm going to have to go look up some live versions and maybe I'll be sold.
Well, there we go. All right, so let's close out the Chaz and Dave section. Now, I've got a couple to choose from. However, I'm torn. Well, I'll let you pick. So which one would you like to talk about? Would you like to talk about London Girls or Turn That Noise Down?
I'm going to go with London Girls.
Okay, that's the one I was going to pick, so.
I said, why does this feel very Mary Poppins? But I'll explain what I mean. For some reason, the whole thing reminded me of Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins. Mm-hmm. It's like the way he sings and the rhythm. But then I was like, why does he only trust women who do laundry and cook? I don't know how to feel about that.
Well, he's singing the virtues of ladies who live in London, and it's probably a very old-fashioned view. But he's saying why they are the best ladies in the world for all those reasons.
Bye, Chaz and Dave. But all I kept saying is I liked it. That one was probably, besides the Ain't No Pleasing You, was the one that I really liked the most. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, all I could imagine was Dick Van Dyke singing it. Like, it specifically very much reminded me of that. Because Mary Poppins, he has that Cockney sound, and he sings like the chim-chimity and like that kind of
bam, bam, boom, bam. Yeah. It's that kind of feel.
And that's exactly what it was. So the whole time I was thinking, I was like, I just couldn't stop thinking about Dick Van Dyke. That's not a bad thing. I mean, but that's really how the song sounds.
And you know what's funny? London Girls, a Rockney classic by Chaz and Dave. Did you know Tori Amos covers this?
No. That sounds kind of cool, though.
Yeah, and I found out that her husband is British, so she must have been introduced to Chaz and Dave through him. And there are actual versions of her doing London Girls. And it's funny that an artist like Tori Amos will be covering Chaz and Dave. I just think it's absolutely fascinating.
I mean, yeah, I could see that. That's cool, though. And I could see how a girl could make a kind of a cool stylistic choice on that. Mm-hmm. It could be fun. I agree. I do want to make one. So I'm gonna cheat. I wrote the one, That's What I Like, or whatever the song.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add one thing. That's just one of the other songs. I thought the hook in that one was really killer. Like, I love the hook in that song. It's
bam, bam, bam. That's what I like. And for those of people who don't know that song, that's just like a list of all the things that he likes, and they're mostly to do with like London and football and things.
Yeah, it was cool. And then I also said, do all British people like their toast burnt? But yeah, I just wanted to say before we move from them, that hook was really killer. I like that part.
Yeah, that's it. And actually, and another song I got tried to listen to was Turn That Noise Down, which is actually really funky. It's actually unbelievably funky.
The first thing I wrote under that is I feel like they're yelling at me.
Yeah. Turn that noise down. Your father's night work, and he's gone upstairs to have a little kip.
Anyway, all right, let's finish it up with one more Status Quo song.
Okay, so there's a few to pick from here, but I think one of my favorite songs by Status Quo is Down Down.
That was probably my favorite too. It had a cool sound. It reminded me a little bit more of kind of the music that I mean, Tim's like me and he listens to everything, but the music I associate Tim with this song reminded me of. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it had that more kind of a rock sound. Was it more late 70s or something for them?
Yeah, Down Down is from 1974, which we all know is a great year. It's probably maybe the best year ever made.
Was there some biases there, Tim?
Well, you know.
Don't give it away. We want them to still think you're 107.
Well, there we go. But it has that kind of, it has a really kind of cool intro. Yeah. And then he comes in with that driving riff, and then the bass goes ba-ba-na, ba-ba-ba-ba, and it's like the whole thing comes in together. And certainly in concert, if you see them do that, I mean, it is just fantastic. You know, when the bass and the drums come in, the whole place erupts.
I'd say, yeah, it had a very good breakdown. Like when it dropped, it was very intense, and it played into the set. That's why this one surprised me that they didn't make it as large in America, because that sounds like a song that I would have heard late 70s, early 80s in America from other artists.
Sure.
That's what that was surprising to me. I was like, this is really cool. I mean, it's like the words aren't that deep. Deep. I didn't mean that to be a pun. For anybody who knows it, let's get down deeper in the song. Anyway, but it also reminded me of, and I don't know why it doesn't make sense in my brain, but I kept thinking of, I hate to say it because he's trash, but that Gary Glitter's come on, come on, come on, come. That intro, it reminded me of that.
Yeah, it's same kind of chanty power type thing, but as we know, Gary Glitter is terrible. So but you know,
the Spice Girls version's completely okay. You can listen to the Spice Girls.
Yeah. I suppose it still has some Gary Glitter elements, which I can never get behind. But there we go.
But anyway, thanks, Gary Glitter, for ruining Spice World for me now too. Can't hear it, but that's for some reason that's what it also reminded me of that. But that's why I was surprised that song wasn't popular, because I could see how it would have been if it were. I don't know if it wasn't that they were marketing it well, people just said like, I don't know what it was, but this one is one that I could hear from most, almost like hair bands from the late 70s, early 80s kind of sound. So I was shocked, but yeah, I would say this was probably the coolest one.
Yeah, I'm surprised someone like, I don't know, Quiet Riot or something didn't cover it, or a band of that ilk didn't, catch on to this stuff and cover it. But it just,
even Rush could have done it. Like, it's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, I asked Hannah, and she said that she can't distinguish now because she's known me for so long. I mean, and had all these influence and lived in the UK as well. So she can't remember what was what before and what was what after. So it's all mushed together.
Makes sense.
But when I speak to my my manager at work who's super into rock, I spoke to him about Status Quo, and he says, yeah, I know the name. And he said, I know maybe one or two of their songs. He's a music guy and he knows that stuff. But I'm sure if I gave him a list of 20 Status Quo songs, he wouldn't know every one. Whereas like in the UK, your Carolines, your Down Downs, rocking all over the world, blah, 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 in the army now, they're like songs, bam, 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 that people know.
It's so interesting. Of all the bands you gave me, well, like we said, Tom Jones is popular in America, just not to the extent. Chaz and Dave, I could see how they are very niche in some way. And a lot of their lyrics and stuff are very related to British things. I kind of get it. But for Status Quo, it's weird to me. And maybe I need to do a deep dive on the internet and find out why they never broke the market, because I'd be curious to know why.
Yeah, it's strange. And as I said, they're known throughout the rest of the world. I think they're known certainly in Europe. And I think they're known in Australia as well. But it's just funny that like US never was a thing.
Well, and isn't that, this is going to sound very, I'm not trying to say, yay, America, we're the best, but I always thought that a lot of bands in Europe, one of their goals was to break in America. Like, that's a common thing.
It is. The market is so huge. It's the same language and the market is huge.
Yeah. Like, from what I've ever seen, like when, like you've got your Brit pop and your British invasion and all those documentaries and things I've read about different bands, one of their goals was, like, their first goal was, if we can make it in America, we can make it anywhere. So It's just interesting.
But there we go. Okay, well, thank you all for listening. I enjoy it. I hope you enjoyed that dive into three acts that you probably wasn't super familiar with.
No, it was fun. And like I said, I'm probably going to go on Google and try to figure out if I can find out why they didn't make it, Tim. I will bring an update to the next episode.
There we are. You fresh news hot off the press.
from 1947. No, I'm
There we
kidding.
go. All right, we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
To remind me of another day to love.